This evening, he will be speaking about regret. Regret is a common theme in literature, music, and art, probably because it is so common for us to feel regret. In Project 9, Persuade with Power, from the Competent Communication Manual, Lloyd Smith will explore the emotion of regret. Lloyd Smith and the Moving Finger.
When the waitress joined us in the restaurant, the woman at the table next to us was already talking. She was leaning forward, intently looking at the man across the table from her, who was trying to focus on his food. She said, "If he thinks we've forgotten, he's wrong. Do you hear me? Wrong. Just because his brother has forgiven him, that doesn't mean we will. We never will." It went on that way for the whole 90 minutes that we sat there eating. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests, I couldn't help but think of the words of the classic Persian poet Omar Khayyam, who once said, "Do not let your life become an episode on the Dr. Phil show." Actually, that's what Khayyam would have said had the ancient Persians been afflicted with Dr. Phil. And what he really said was, the moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. What's done is done. Time only flows in one direction. We can't unthink our thoughts, unsay our words, or undo our actions. It's over with. It's done. So why doesn't it feel done much of the time? When I was 16, I became a beatnik, or at least as much a beatnik as one could be living in the Spokane Valley suburbs with conservative Republican parents. Like the rest of my sadly misunderstood beatniks, I was an anguished poet. I'm not going to read you any of my anguished poetry because many of you will be eating dinner soon. But trust me, I had anguish by the bucketful. I knew that all of us anguished poets smoked cigarettes because I had seen their pictures in Life magazine. So at age 16, I became a smoker. Smoking was something that was not done anywhere near my reformed smoker dad, not even way beyond his equipment shed, which is where I did it. And my mom had mom radar. She probably knew I was smoking the moment I lit my first cigarette. But the day she directly asked me, I directly lied. And I lied to her every other time she asked me to. I even lied to her after I had quit smoking about 5 years later. Now I know that sounds like a really small thing. And that's because it was a really small thing. But that's the point. All of those petty deceits, those casual cruelties, those minor omissions that we practice as we go along in life begin to accumulate over the days and weeks and months and years and decades that we live. All of us do that sort of thing. Every time I lied to my mom, the burden that I carried through my life got a little bit heavier. Now I know that I wasn't any worse than almost all other teenagers are. The reason I know that is that a few years later, the universe laughed in my face and made me a high school teacher. I got to spend a quarter century experiencing arrows from the target's point of view. One day, when I was seething with anger about a remark some kid had made, another student, wise beyond his years, standing near my desk, said quietly to me, "You know, Mr. Smith, you're in a marathon. You're never going to finish if you get mad and stop every time you step on some dog doo-doo on the road." Pure teenage poetry, although not nearly as anguished as my own poetry had been. But he was right. As you go along in your life, you can't keep picking up burdens to carry with you. They consume all of your time. They waste your energy, and they deplete your spirit. Pardon me. Well, that's not a good thing. That woman in the restaurant, I fear that she will let her burdens crush her and her poor husband, because she's been carrying them for 20 years, and there's anger and resentment boiling within her and made them heavier. My teenage self, I understood after a couple of years that my mother had taken on the burden of the lies I had told her for herself. After all, she was my mom. My adult self, I realized as the years went on that the insulting remarks the kids sometimes made were too small and too insignificant to be actual burdens. And that's the way it should be. The moving finger has written all of the words in the stories of our lives so far, and it has moved on. What's done is done. What's over is over. Will you be moving on, or will Dr. Phil be discussing your life on TV tomorrow? Lay your burden down and accept that what's done is done. And Madam Toastmaster, so am I.